Welcome to the Existential Empath Podcast. My name is Tanya, and I am an intuitive empath. My intention is to share valuable tools and techniques that I have learned so you can tap into your own inner healer naturally and intuitively. Welcome back, everyone. Today I have Christian de la Huerta. He is a spiritual teacher, personal transformation coach, and leading voice in the breathwork community. He has traveled the world offering inspiring and life-transforming retreats, combining psychological and spiritual teachings with lasting effects. As an award-winning author, Christian has spoken at numerous universities and conferences and on the TedX stage. His new book, Awakening the Soul Power, was described by multiple Grammy Award winner and one of my dad's absolute favorite singers, Gloria Estefan, as a balm for the soul of anyone searching for truth and answers to life's difficult questions. Welcome, Christian. It's such an honor to have you on my show today.
Thank you so much for having me, Tanya. I'm really happy to be here with you. And I love that your dad loves Gloria.
Oh, he loves Gloria. We grew up listening to Miami Sound Machine, and I had actually called him last night to let him know that I had a guest on today that, Gloria had actually read your book and had spoken about it. And he was so excited to hear that because he goes, she was just in the parade. I just saw her. So he still follows her.
Yeah. And that's great that you remember Miami Sound Machine. They used to play at our high school dances way back when, before Gloria was Gloria.
Are you serious? Yeah. It's so neat. Yes. Oh man, bringing back the 80s. I love that. Well, Christian, today you and I are going to talk about awakening the soul of power, transforming your relationship with your soulful power. So let's talk about that. What does soulful power mean? And what does that mean to you?
Well, let me zoom out a little bit and say that most of us have an ambivalent relationship to power. I would even say conflicted. Like, part of us wants it, part of us is afraid of it. And I think what we fear, like at core, is that if we really stepped into our power, that other people wouldn't be able to handle it, and that we might end up rejected, alone. And who wants that? Yeah. I think we also fear that we might abuse it. And no wonder. How many abuses of power have we witnessed or experienced in our lifetimes? And all we got to do in any day is turn on the news and witness one of those. Yeah. And then add to that the fact that we've also been conditioned to believe that power is bad. Power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts, absolutely. But what they didn't tell us about that quote is that Lord Acton was speaking specifically about political power, not personal power, which is what you and I are talking about.
Big difference, yes.
Big difference. So when you put all that into the mix and you add to that the fact that we've been conditioned to be afraid of the emotions, we've turned the emotions into something weakness. We hate conflict. We avoid confrontation. What happens is that we end up giving away our power, our innate, inherent power that nobody can give to us. Nobody can take it away. We are the only ones who give it away. And to me, the saddest part, Tanya, is the reasons for which we give it away.
Yeah. And what are those reasons?
Well, we say yes when inside we really feel no. And we settle for an illusion of acceptance, a false sense of security. And we settle for crumbs of pseudo love, because it's not even real love if we're not presenting ourselves authentically. Whatever we get back is also going to be inauthentic.
I've talked about that before, how people pleasing actually pulls us out of alignment of our authenticity.
Exactly.
And so it's saying yes when we want to say, when we really deeply want to say no. It's doing something for someone else, but not doing it in alignment with our own soul.
That's right. That's right. And that's not a black and white line, because there is a part of us that is genuinely generous, and we do want to do things for other people. What is important is what the come from is. What's driving that behavior? Are we doing something because it's in our goodness in our hearts and because we love them and we want to do something for them? Or is it a little bit trickier? Are we doing something because we're expecting to get something in return, whether it's validation or love or whatever it is that we sell ourselves out for?
Yeah, absolutely. And so, Christian, why do we find ourselves in these patterns or in these loops that are, self-defeating, self-sabotaging, where we find ourselves giving our power away more than actually harnessing our power?
I know it's tragic. And it's because of the short answer is fear, right? We fear that rejection, we fear judgment, we fear we don't want, being abandoned, being left. So we stuff ourselves into smaller little packages. We stuff ourselves into tiny little boxes, so that as we won't rock the boat too much. But there's a huge price that we pay for that, which is that we're selling out on ourselves and our authentic power, on our purpose. And at some point, that becomes like, it's soul devouring. And we're risking not only our own happiness, but then we start getting bitter about it and becoming resentful. And then that has an impact on all of our relationships, because every time that we say yes, when inside we feel no, deep down inside, that's not okay with us. And so the more we do that, which in many of our cases, it's been a lifetime of doing that, that starts turning into bitterness and resentment inside, which then gets projected onto our relationships. And so it's not a good strategy at all.
It's not. And many of us learn these tools, techniques, or whatever we want to call them, at a very young age, on how to people please, how to fit in, how to be accepted, how to give and receive love. And a lot of it is based off of those who are in our environment, whether that's our parents, our peers, our teachers, friends, whatever it may be. And so, we are running off of these old childhood programs that may not even have been good programs to even begin with, right?
That's so true. And some of it is not even our stuff. It's just crap that we took on from our parents, from conditioning, from society, from the culture. It's not even ours. And we've been running from those patterns as if it were our stuff. And then we've also been functioning from, and of course, all of this subconsciously, from past traumas, like stuff that happened to us when we were kids, as you're saying. And so we misheard something. Something said something to us in a moment of reactivity, overwhelm. And those young minds that didn't know any better, we took it on as truth. We personalized it. We started to believe that there was something wrong with us. And that's sad, that we're still running from those programs, because if we are, even remnants of that, tendrils left of that, it's having an impact on all of our relationships.
It really is. And, I look back at my younger version of self in my 20s, when I had first gotten married, and I became a different person. I really did. And a lot of it was because I was kind of molding myself to be someone that I thought the person that I was married to wanted me to be. And it was kind of strange, because in that relationship, I wasn't personally recognizing it, but my friends and family were recognizing it. They're like, where did your light go? Who are you? Who is this person that you're trying to be? And so it took me many years after leaving that relationship to even be able to reflect back to it, to even recognize that I had changed into this person that I thought that this person wanted, but in reality, it didn't even help, because obviously the marriage, that relationship, wasn't able to work through that. But it just kind of was an example for me of just be yourself, be your authentic version of you, be genuine, and whoever's meant to be in your life will be there and they'll stick, right?
That's so true. I mean, that's ultimate wisdom. It's as simple and as difficult as that, right? Because that entails figuring out who we are. And so we've got to do that work of going within and asking ourselves, the hard questions. Who am I? And why do I do the things I do
to this day?
What triggers me? What are my likes? What are my dislikes? What turns me on? What am I passionate about? And the more that we get clear about who we are, then we can just rest in that, and we just get to be who we are wherever we are. And you're absolutely right. What other people do with that is not our job. That's not our problem. That's theirs. right? Our job is to be the most that we can be, to express that unique human potential to the max, to the fullest. Because if we don't do that, nobody else is going to do that.
And it's our own unique, expression of who we are. And
Exactly.
that's why we're here. We're all sharing our own uniqueness and our own authenticity. So Christian, you do what's called soulful breathwork. Can you talk about that? What is that?
Yeah, and let me pause that, because you just reminded me that I never answered your original question about what is soulful power. Uh, so one of the reasons that we have a conflict about power is because we don't realize that there's more than one type. So I talk about worldly power or ego power, the way that the world relates to power, which is what, how do we what do we tend to associate with power? People who have money, who are famous, who are high up in some kind of hierarchy, whether it's the corporate ladder or some other institution. And all those kind of powers, expressions of power, are outside of us. They're external. So fickle, right? Here today, gone tomorrow.
And they're kind of taught, right? They're taught to us what power looks like in the world, on the world stage.
Yes. And that kind of power is always has an agenda. So it's always trying to get something for itself. And it's aggrandizing. So it's always trying to appear bigger than it is, more powerful than it is. It's like kind of puffing itself up like a turkey in heat. Whereas the other kind of power, what I call soulful power, is inside each and every one of us. And like we were saying before, nobody can give it to us. Nobody can take it away. And it's humble. Like it doesn't have anything to prove to anybody. Like it just is. And it's, rather than having an agenda, it's about service. It's about making a difference. So I think of a Gandhi or a Gandalf, if you're into the Lord of the Rings, and in their simple monastic robes, their sandaled feet. You would never know how much power they hold until it's necessary. Mm-hmm. And then get out of the way. Gandhi brought the British Empire to its knees when it was at its highest point in terms of global reach, without landing a punch or shooting a single gun. That's power.
That's fascinating. That, just thinking of that in itself, just really harnessing your own soulful power, that personal power, and how it's infinite, right, Christian? It's not like you've got the set limit of how much power you have within your soul. It's infinite.
That's right. We are the only ones who put those limits on it.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like time and time again, I find myself doing that too. And I know this understanding and this concept of limited beliefs. And I find myself catching myself and, I'm limiting myself again. No, we've got to break that, break that barrier, break that program, break that thought pattern of limiting ourselves, because it is just beyond limitations.
Yeah, it's subtle and it's insidious. And it's almost like the further we go along on the spiritual journey, on the consciousness journey, becoming more aware, it becomes more subtle and trickier.
And you catch yourself in those moments too, because I find that it's like, ooh, how did I get down that path when, it's almost like I know better than that. But that's part of being conscious, is catching yourself and then shifting it and aligning.
Making a different choice in the moment.
Yeah. And it's just really understanding that and not beating yourself up about it. Because I think that's part of where I'm learning that process is I do catch myself, in those thoughts. And then I want to find a way to beat myself up. I'm like, no, Tanya, that's in itself an old program, an old pattern.
Exactly. It's all part of the ego and its shenanigans. And you're right. That self-punishment thing we do in ourselves, it's part of that. It's part of that same dynamic. And it's beating ourselves up unnecessarily. The things the number we do in ourselves, the things that we tell ourselves inside of our heads, we would never say to anybody else. We're so cruel and harsh with ourselves, much more than we are with others.
Yeah. And it's funny. Last year I went home to spend some time with my parents because my mom had fallen and broken her heels. And so I went home to help. And it was really funny being, I hadn't been home in over 20 some years, to that extent where I was staying there for a month or more at a time. and just recognizing where the patterns, that I have picked up come from watching my parents. And so it was kind of neat in the moment to consciously bring those patterns to the awareness of my parents and the awareness of myself, and watching them kind of sit back and say, wow, where did I pick up that pattern? And then seeing them trace it back to where it came from. And this can go back many generations as to where these patterns of self-sabotage, judgment, people pleasing, all of those things start.
Yes.
And so it's really just, being consciously aware of it and bringing it to the surface to heal.
Absolutely. So true. Carl Jung, the psychologist, said that the process of enlightenment is having the subconscious conscious, right? So that most of us are going through life, we don't even know why we do the things we do, with unexamined beliefs, unquestioned values. And all that we're saying is look at it, analyze it, question it.
Yeah.
You can land on the same choice if you want to, but at least go through the process of questioning and asking yourself, why do I believe that? Where did that come from?
Start? Where did that come from? And then if you have to, pick up the phone and ask your parents, ask your teachers, ask your siblings, where did this come from? Because sometimes you don't even know.
Yeah. And sometimes it feels in our relationships, because we repeat patterns in relationships, and sometimes it feels like it's the same boring movie that we've seen before. It's only a different actor, a different co-lead,
like a Hallmark rom-com. It's always the same.
Same old crap, same arguments, same issues, just with a different actor, a different player.
Exactly. So let's talk about breathwork, Christian, because you are, you're a voice in the breathwork community. So let's talk about breathwork and how we can bring these things to the conscious level through breath.
Yeah, the breath is magical. It really is. And breathwork is a really broad umbrella term. So, there are a lot of breathing practices, breathing techniques for different purposes, for increasing focus or energy, or for relaxation and sleeping better. The type of breathwork that I'm talking about it's longer. It's sort of like breathwork on steroids. You breathe in a certain way for about an hour and a half. Some practices do it even longer. And amazing stuff happens. Let me put it this way. My dad was a psychiatrist. My degree's in psychology. I was on a track to get a PhD. When I discovered breath work, I jumped tracks. I never went for the PhD because it works so fast and heals so profoundly at so many levels. I don't know anything to this day, and I've been doing this for like 30 years, over 30 years. I don't know anything that heals past trauma more effectively. And I'm talking serious stuff. I've worked with so many people, countless people who sexual abuse, incest, rape, violent stuff that they experienced, and it works. It heals that stuff. And they haven't studied breathwork in the same way that they've studied meditation, like what happens in the brain when we meditate. A lot of research on that and the many benefits of meditation. They're just now starting to do breath work. But here's how I think of it, that it's not scientific, but intuitively, and from a psycho-spiritual approach, it makes sense to me why it works. If we think about it, in most religions and spiritual traditions in the world, the same word, one word, can mean breath or it can mean spirit. And so, for example, from pneuma, in ancient Greek, from which we get pneumonia, that meant both lung and soul. From the Latin spirare, from that root, we get both respiration and inspiration or expiration. In Hawaiian, ha is the same, breath or spirit, depending on the context. So to me, that's where the power of the breath ultimately comes from.
Absolutely. And so, me coming from a healthcare background, I see it as oxygenating the cells. When you are bringing in more oxygen, it's expanding your cells, which what it's doing is it creating space. So as we're creating more space within the body, creating more space within our consciousness, it's bringing in that breath, bringing in that chi, bringing in that life force, that energy, and just really,
Yes.
expanding our our multidimensionality, that physical, emotional, mental, spiritual aspect of ourself. And so this is really interesting to me. I've never done breath work for an hour to an hour and a half before. I've done different types of breath work to try to activate DMT in my body. I've done it to release trauma and stress. But talk about that. Is it a rapid breath through the entire time, or is it different speeds of breath? How does that look?
It's different speeds. What makes it different. It's a circular connected breath. So that means no pause between your inhale and your exhale. And I wouldn't recommend that your audience try it on their own, because it's powerful. It's intense. It's actually the opposite of hyperventilation. Some of the symptoms feel very similar, like the spaciness, tingliness. But if we think about it, when we hyperventilate, we're exhaling more than we're inhaling. That's why they give us that bag.
Yeah.
This kind of breath work, you're inhaling way more than you're exhaling. And it's what you're talking about. It's filling the body with that prana, with chi, with the life force, which courses through the body, through the energy channels, for which we do have proof now. Western medicine a couple of years ago did find proof that we do have energy channels. The meridians do exist, what Eastern medicine has done for thousands of years. So now we do have evidence that they do exist. So it courses through those channels until it hits a block, and it begins to dissolve those blockages. And what the blockages are places where we have stored past trauma, where we have stored repressed emotions. Because what used to be spiritual teaching, that everything is energy, now we know from quantum physics, everything is energy, and energy cannot be destroyed. It can only change forms. So all those countless times in our lives that we have stuffed our emotions, all those no's that were really underneath the yeses that we verbalized, that stuff doesn't go away. All that unhealed past trauma gets stuck in the tissues of the body. And after years and decades of doing that, we walk around with layers and layers upon more layers of emotional crap. And then here we are trying to have a relationship in the present, and all of it is getting filtered through that lifetime of repressed emotions and unhealed past trauma. Yikes.
Yeah, exactly. And, I always have the analogy that our meridians are like rivers, and that those areas of balls of emotions are like beaver dams. It's like you got the free flowing river, and then it hits the dam, and then it tries to make its way around it, the water, and it's trying to move through it and around and up on the banks. And, but once you can open up that channel and open up that energy, which there's several modalities that do this, including breath work. I just did a show a few days ago on Qigong and moving that energy through, and that incorporates breath work as well. I think that breath work is the basic thing that we all have access to. We all have access to stop and consciously focus on our breath.
It is ours, and it's free, right? It's like I said before, it's best to do it with somebody who's trained the first few times, the first 5 or 10 times, but then you can be taught how to do it, and you can do it on your own. And the reason for that is that in the beginning is when we start releasing all that suppressed emotional crap.
Yeah.
And it can be really intense. And some people, as we release that old trauma, in some cases, it's like you're reliving it. So it's really good to have somebody there sitting with you, watching space, holding space for you, so that we feel safe enough to allow that stuff to come up and clear.
Yeah.
And it works fast. It works so fast. And I love your image of the river, because I call breathwork spiritual Drano. It's like,
I love it. I love how we bring in analogies all the time. It's awesome.
Yeah.
And Christian, it's crazy to think that we haven't been taught how to breathe correctly. I've talked about this before. We've been so programmed to shallow breathe. And when I started learning how to breathe, you can feel that shift in your body. And I wasn't doing the intense breath work that you teach people how to do. I was just doing more when I was working in the hospital and I was having those intense moments. I'd go and find a quiet space and just breathe, and take that time to just give myself some silence and to be able to connect with my breath. But it was like I was a different person walking into that room after breathing and walking out. It was like the best medicine that you can ask
Even
for.
that, Tanya, even that is life changing. Even like, if you're stuck in traffic and you start feeling yourself getting anxious and angry and frustrated, take a breath, right? Use your breath, because it's not going to make any difference how angry you get and how many birds you shoot at other people, and how many, what you scream at them. It's not going to make traffic go any faster. So the only one who's paying a price is us. And so if we learn that practice to use the breath, right, like right before we're headed into a difficult conversation that we know could very easily go south, use your breath, right? There are swamis in India that have that much control over their body that they can tell their heart to slow down, and it does. Some of them so
Lowers blood
profoundly that
pressure. Yeah.
they mimic states that are hard to differentiate from death. Most of us are probably never going to learn that degree of skill, but anybody can slow down the breath. When we slow down the breath, the heart has no choice. The heart has to slow down. And when the heart slows down, the body begins to relax. The nervous system begins to quiet down. So it's really a simple practice. Anybody can do it. It just takes presence, remembering, being aware of ourselves, and knowing what are the signs when we're about to get triggered, which we all know. Right? We all know what happens in our body when we're about to react and get angry, right? Our breath shorts. Our heart starts palpitating. Our face flush. We get hot.
Start lashing out sometimes. Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. We got to nip it out before we we got to nip it before we lash out.
Exactly.
And that's the thing.
There's
a magic moment
like a pressure
in there.
cooker. It's like,
yeah. If we wait too long, it's too late. So we have to nip it at the bud before we go over the fire, the waterfall, and then say or do something that we're gonna regret. We've all done it a bunch of times. React, and then regret it. Like the adrenaline quiets down, and then it's like, oh God, I can't believe I said that.
Yeah, that was my younger version of self. It was, hold it in, hold it in, hold it in, boom, blow up, and then think about it, and then feel guilty later, and then go apologize.
Exactly.
Like that's kind of how my program ran until I actually recognized my patterns. And I was like, this is not healthy. This is so toxic. But I was holding it in because I didn't want to blow up on someone. I didn't want to cause conflict in the moment. But in reality, I caused a huge conflict because I was holding it in for so long.
It only makes it worse because that stuff that we repress doesn't go away.
No,
it's only
it moves around in the body.
Exactly. And it's festering beneath the surface. So that then, we repress and we repress and we repress some more. And then the next unfortunate one comes and says something to us the wrong way, and boom, volcanic eruption.
It's like misdirected anger, right? You're like that poor person at the grocery store who doesn't even know you. You're just lashing out all your traumas onto them because you've been suppressing it for the past, 6 months.
Or 6 years or 60 years.
That happened to me. It's not really a funny story. I feel bad for this person, but I was going through a divorce, and I was moving out, and I was moving into a new space, and I had gone to a furniture store. And when I first walked in, you know how they're kind of hawky. The moment you walk in, they're just following you around. Well, I had shared with the gentleman who came up to me. I said, listen, I'm looking to buy a few things. I just want my space. I want to look around myself, and I will come find you. You will be my representative. So just give me some space. Well, he didn't listen to my little warning that I gave him. I was with my sister, and he kept following me around. And I had a meltdown. I had a meltdown on this poor guy who was just trying to do his job. But, at the time I had so much pent up frustration and stress on just leaving a 10-year marriage and moving out on my own and doing all these things, that this was my misdirected anger onto this man. And my sister was like, I had to apologize to him. And I said, I don't know. It just, all of that pressure cooker came out of me. And you see this time and time again. I used to see it a lot working in the hospital with grieving families. And so one of the first things I would tell them to do was to breathe. Let's take a deep breath. Do you need anything? What are the basic needs? Water, food, sleep. Then we would have the conversation.
Yeah, yeah. And you're so right, because that's the other thing that happens when we suppress that stuff. It's like everything is energy. So all those repressed emotions have to come out. So either they come out in that dramatic way that you were just talking about, that explosive way after suppressing it for too long, or it starts seeping out and showing up as bodily symptoms, as disease, cancer, heart attacks, ulcers.
Very
So
unpleasant things.
we've got to get this. We've got to learn how to feel our emotions, how to have our emotions, how to communicate them courageously, because it's always going to take courage, responsibly owning that they're our emotions and that nobody can make us feel anything. And gracefully as possible, in a way that the other person can hear it, rather than just dumping it on them.
Yeah.
20 years in 5 minutes.
Exactly. So, Christian, let's talk about your book, Awakening the Soul of Power. Let's talk about that. You have a very strong message for women in this book. And so but you also have a strong message for men too. But let's talk about those messages, and let's talk about awakening the soul of power.
Yeah, that's the whole message of the book, is that there is a way that we can step into power that doesn't require that it be about hierarchy, control, fear, force, domination, manipulation. That doesn't require that we push anybody down, step on them in order for us to feel powerful. So, like, how do we do it in a different way? And the book is for everybody. Everybody struggles with issues of power, but it has a particular message about women's empowerment. And that comes from my belief, my conviction, really, that the empowerment of women is the single most important thing that needs to happen in the world. And it's not to idealize women. It's not to put women up on a pedestal. Women also abuse power. And it's certainly not to give women more stuff, more crap that they have to clean up in this world.
Or more masculine energy.
Yes.
I think when you think of that, you're like, a powerful woman has a strong masculine energy, or at least that's a societal program.
Yes. Yeah. That's the conditioning, that we think to be powerful, you have to look a certain way. So we see that, those stereotypes in corporate America, and women with like really linear, controlled wardrobes and short linear hair, and they walk around like robots, just like men do.
Yeah.
But it all comes from a misunderstanding of what power is, and what it means to be a man, and what it means to be a woman. And so I believe that when women are in 50% of power in this world, we're going to have a very different relationship to war and poverty and hunger and social justice and education and the environment, to all of it. So for me, it's like a strategic thing. Like, what is one thing that I could focus on that will then impact many of the other issues that we're facing? And even though, there's no comparison in in the sense that the price that women have paid for the last several thousand years of this patriarchal approach to power, power over hierarchy, my way or the highway, this cowboy mentality.
Hand over fist. Yeah.
Yeah, but men also pay a price for that. And let's look at a couple of numbers that are very telling. The rate of suicide in the US, it's really interesting. Men commit suicide 4 times as frequently as women.
They do. Yeah. And I used to see that working in the hospital. And, like states like Montana, more suicide rates, because they have been held to that strong masculine persona that oftentimes they have a hard time living up to. That's right. And so it's that limiting and limited perception of what it means to be a man. And 70% of the suicides committed by middle-aged white men, which is interesting, because that's the group that I think it's pretty clear still holds the majority of the power in the world. And so you would think that, the group that has the majority of the powers would have a better lifestyle, but it isn't that way, because women outlive men by 5 years in the US, by 7 years globally. Wow. So what's going on there? And I think it's what we're talking about earlier. Ourselves, right? No, I'm just kidding. Yeah. Well, I think it's the repression of the emotions, and this walking around like we think that to be a man, you got to be this uncaring, unfeeling robot. And so that's why I added a whole chapter on what it means to be a man in the 21st century, sort of redefining some of these
stereotypical or maybe archetypal roles that men have fulfilled throughout history? How do we upgrade the definition of masculinity for the 21st century? Because the way that it is now, it's not working for anybody, including men.
Absolutely. And I used to see this in healthcare. You'd see women dragging their husbands in to get, to be looked at, or, they were holding on to all of this stuff within their bodies, and they were having all of these physical ailments, and they weren't tending to them. And, so it's like the men don't, they find this strength, they have that strength there, and they don't want to appear weak. Where then, me as a woman too, growing up in, I had a very masculine energy because that's what I was kind of taught to be. And so I too would hold all of that stuff in. And so I think that, this plays both on both sides, men and women, this holding in these emotions and feeling as if we are less than or weak if we are showing any signs of vulnerability.
Which is really interesting, right? Because there's a couple of really faulty assumptions in there. That the emotions are weakness. It's like, wait a minute, emotions aren't strength. They're not weakness. They're energy, like everything else in creation. We only get in trouble with the emotions when we stuff them, when we suppress them. And then the other faulty assumption in that thinking is that the feminine is weak. Because yes, we're all conditioned, but especially men, like little boys don't cry. Since we were kids, that's been ingrained into us. And thankfully that's changing more and more now. But the faulty assumption there that the feminine is weakness is like, wait a minute, you want to talk strength, courage, resilience, power? Let's talk about the power of creation that resides in a female body. The life-giving power of creation. And, I think of this joke, Betty White, who passed away.
I love Betty White. Yep.
Oh my gosh, she was so amazing.
As I did.
Oh, really? How amazing. And what a great loss for us that she's no longer with us. But anyway, the story goes that she was doing one of those celebrity interviews where there's like 3 or 4, a group interview. And somebody said something about having balls. And forgive me, anybody, if they get offended by this. But so she said, wait a minute. How is it that we got this belief and this connection between balls and having courage? You thump those little things and the guy collapses, bends over in pain, in sheer pain. You want to talk courage? You want to talk strength? Let's talk vaginas. Those things take a pounding.
Hilarious. And it's so true because, just that, I had a guest, Charlene Byers, and we talked about this concept of, how she talks a lot about attracting a soulmate or someone into your life. And she talks about how us ladies, we're often trying to fill the role of the man in the dating world or in our relationship world versus just kind of stepping back and allowing ourselves to receive and to allow the man to be masculine. It's almost like we've role reversed, or we've kind of just unharmonized our energies within ourselves because of the way that we have grown up, or whatever our childhood belief systems are. And so it's just fascinating to think that, but these are things that have been programmed very subtly throughout our whole life, like get a pair of balls, go get your balls back, or, those types of statements that people just say on the fly, very subconsciously.
Man up.
Man up.
You gotta man up, right? You gotta have that stiff upper lip. It's all about.
It really is.
And now we know that's not a good strategy, because that stuff that we're anchoring into the tissues of our body it's only going to cause harm.
Yes, and it's causing tension, because when you think of that, it's restricting, right? And it's just causing more tension and more buildup in the body. So how do we shift these thoughts? What are some practices that you can recommend for people who are trying to really work on balancing out these energies within themselves?
Well, it's a process. And I mean, one easy one is like what we were talking about before, use the breath. Use the breath. The breath it's all it takes is that moment of awareness before we go over the waterfall and say or do something that we regret. If you just take a breath in that moment, then it buys us time to make a choice, right? Because we can still choose anger, by the way, right? Anger in itself is not bad. We only get in trouble with anger because we've suppressed it so that it comes out like in total reaction. But anger can be used consciously with intention. Um, and we feel the difference, right? When it's a reaction, when it's coming from an old place of hurt, you hurt me, someone hurt you back, whether it's like an intentional use of anger, it's like, no, this is not okay. It comes from a different place and you feel it. Even though we may not have the words to describe the difference, it feels different to us. Like, like taking a strong stand for a social problem that is just wrong. And we can use the anger to make a difference in that way. So it's the come from is different. The energy,
which I think
is
is what is happening collectively, right now, is that it's like push the bear, push the bear, push the bear. And now all these emotions are coming up to the surface, and we're going through a mass collective healing right now, or a purging, so to speak, of all of the stuff we've suppressed.
Yes,
From
exactly.
an individual level to a collective level.
As above, so below, as inside, so as within, so
Absolutely.
without. So that for sure. And the other thing that's happening that we were talking about earlier is like all these unquestioned, unexamined sexual roles, gender roles are being questioned. What does it mean to be a woman and what does it mean to be a man? And so we're in the middle of that confusing time where things are not the way they used to be, and we haven't landed yet on where we're going. So it's understandable that it's confusing. And it's understandable too that men are even extra confused, because as women, more and more women reclaim their power, which they're doing. It's interesting that I think the last year that I have dates for, like 2017, 2018, more than in 40% of heterosexual households, the woman is now earning more than the man.
Yeah.
And more than 50% of college graduates are women. And so when you combine that with a lot of these jobs that men have traditionally fulfilled, that have been outsourced or replaced by computers and robots, a lot of men are having a crisis. Like, who am I if I'm not the provider? Because that was their identity of what it means to be a man. So that was one of those roles that I go into in that chapter. And it's like, wait a minute, let's not limit the definition of what it means to be a provider. Are you really going to define yourself by the size of your paycheck? That's a very limited perspective of what it means to be a man. What if we then expanded that? What if we provided a safe space in the home? What if we were the rock in the household on which our spouses, our kids, our family could stand as they explore ways of being in the world that are going to be a match for them, that are going to lead to their being happy and fulfilled? It's like, wow, that is so much infinitely more worthy than the size of the paycheck. So, but we're right in the middle of that. So it's understandable. My heart goes out to them that it's a lot of men are in crisis now as all these roles are being redefined.
It is. And we're all kind of just spinning our heads. I mean, I grew up in a family structure where mom and dad both worked, but mom and dad both cooked and cleaned and did a lot of things. So I saw a masculine playing the feminine, and I saw a feminine playing the masculine, and vice versa. And so, but then when I, got married, I fell into a structure where mom stayed at home and tended to all the family's needs, and then dad went to work. And so, in that dynamic with me in that relationship, it was just very different upbringings on how we, kind of viewed that masculine role and that feminine role. And so we're going to a place of harmonization now, and the universe is always seeking for harmony. And and it's like we're going through a bit of a sifting process. I feel like we're all being sifted individually on, and I even question that daily myself. What is my role, in my relationships, and what am I bringing forward, and what percentage am I bringing a feminine energy, and what percentage am I bringing a masculine energy, and is it more, one way or the other? And so it's really just being self-aware in your own energy and what you're bringing to the table.
That's it. That's ultimately the answer to your question earlier. Like, what can we do? It's become more self-aware. We can't do anything about what we can't see. So that's the first step, and sometimes it helps to get a coach, to get or go to a therapist, or even just a friend who's done the work on themselves
Yeah.
and who gets these concepts of how the mind works and how we sabotage ourselves, and who can be a credible mirror and who can help us see the blind spots that we all have.
Yeah.
And so it's really good to have that support.
I encourage everyone to go home in their later years and go spend some time with their parents. You'll have a nice little mirror splash back in your face. I think I did more healing in that several months that I was home than I had done in a long time. And I think it was just because everything was there. And I wasn't just healing, my parents were healing too. And that was the
For
glory
sure.
of it all, is that we were going through this kind of familial healing process during that. I'm not going to say it was easy, because it definitely wasn't, because I was being triggered. Things were coming to the forefront, but I had different tools and techniques this go around. So I was able to move through it without lashing out and having those bursts of emotion that I, would have had earlier on in my life.
How beautiful is that? That it turned out to be a family healing. How beautiful is that? And you're right, it's not easy. In fact, I say that it's heroic to do what we're talking about. Even to become aware of what we do, the things we do, we have to be willing to go inside and ask ourselves all the hard questions, and sometimes remember stuff that's not pleasant to remember, or feel stuff that we have spent years or decades running away from, trying not to feel. So it's heroic, and it is so worth it, because the alternative, it doesn't work. The alternative means that we're going to continue being run by that our relationships are going to continue to be run and ruined by our subconscious stuff that we're not even aware of why we do the things we do.
Yeah, and we're never going to feel that fulfillment within our relationships, because we're continuing to run off of old, outdated programs that
exactly.
just no longer benefit us anymore. And it's like we're seeking these, fulfilling relationships, when really we need to look within ourselves and heal that relationship within.
Exactly.
Yeah. So Christian, this has been such an enriching conversation, and I've really enjoyed spending this time with you. So for those out there listening or those watching, how can they connect with you? Where can they find your book? Do you have a website where they can look more into the services that you provide?
Thank you so much for asking that question, Tanya. And thanks for having me on the show, by the way. And thanks for having the show, because I know that in your willingness to do that, a lot of lives are being touched and impact and improved. And in terms of where to reach me, the book is available wherever books are sold. So you can order it at your local bookstore if you want to support them. You can get it on Amazon or some of the other online platforms. In terms of reaching me, probably the best way is my website, which is soulfulpower.com, SOULFUL power.com. And for anybody who goes to my website and gets on the email list, and we all know how easy it is to click unsubscribe if it doesn't work for you down the road. But anybody who does get on my email list, we'll send them a sample chapter from the book. We'll send them some power practices designed to integrate the teachings, so they don't stay at the level of information, because you and I know we don't need more information. We've got information overload. What we need is transformation. And that comes from really taken on a set of teachings. And that's what those power practices are designed to do. And we'll send them also a guided meditation, a recorded guided meditation about how to move into a place of trust, how to be that eye of the storm in these times of chaos and fear and uncertainty.
Absolutely. And so I really appreciate the energy that you're bringing out into the world, Christian. And thank you for, being that calmness in the eye of the storm. I mean, I lived in Florida for 20 years, so I can definitely have a deeper understanding of what that eye entails.
Exactly.
And being that calm, because everything's flying around you. There's all this chaos going on. And it takes a lot of inner work for us to get to that point where we can be the calmness in the eye. And I really appreciate you, bringing forth an energy, bringing forth a presence of holding space for men and women who are moving through this process, moving through this healing. So thank you so much for spending time with us today and just really sharing your 30 plus years of knowledge. And for those of you out there, go check out Christian's book, Awakening the Soul of Power. Thank you so much, Christian.
Thank you, Tom.
You deserve to navigate your life as an empath in alignment with health, happiness, and abundance. To learn more about the services that I provide, including Beyond Quantum Healing Hypnosis, EFT tapping, and the Emotion Code, visit my website at www.thesoulcafe.org.